Hello, I'm Robert Whitaker, and welcome to Journeys Through Time. This is a history of Hansford County, and it's going to be through the words of people who have lived here, made their lives here, from the beginning of the 20th century up into almost the present time. Most of the podcasts that you're going to listen to from this program were already recorded when some of us were children and when others of us weren't even born yet, by KRDF radio in Spearman. So we have a bunch of those. My wife Holly and I are both on the museum board, and we found digitized versions of these recordings, and of course we've also found versions that are on cassettes. Some of them will have converted to digital soon. But I decided to go ahead and create this website, create a Facebook page, so that we could share this with the county, with Hansford County, and with those who are connected to this county. Forgive us for poor quality of audio when it happens. It's part of it. These recordings are kind of old, so we're going to do our best to clean it up on our side before we deliver it to the platform. Hopefully, we can continue to do this on a shoestring budget and not have to worry about advertising or asking for money or anything like that. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and move into our first podcast with Gus and Clementine Renner. Gus and Clementine Renner are what I would consider to be pioneers of Hansford County. For sure, Clementine was here. Her maiden name is Clementine Venneman. Those of you who know the Vennemans in the North County, in the north side of Hansford County, Clementine came here in 1905, and you'll hear about this in this podcast. It's amazing, her stories that she tells, and of course her husband Gus, and the stories that he tells about the Dust Bowl. So enjoy. And we hope to continue to improve as we move forward into developing this podcast over time. Thank you.
KRDF-FM, Spearman, Texas, serving all of Hansford County. 52 degrees, cloudy skies. It's 9:09. We welcome you to Hansford Information on KRDF. And here is your hostess, Carolyn Cumming.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Hansford Information. This morning we're doing another edition of Hansford Memories, and today is May 10th, 1996. It's a Friday, and we'll be visiting this morning with Clementine and NF Gus Renner. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning, Carol.
Aren't you glad that we got a little rain last night?
Oh,
it was wonderful. I prayed all the way through it that it last all night. That's what I thought.
Okay, yeah, we got about 2,500 last night, and so maybe that'll help us through and break this drought we've been in, and hopefully help the farmers. Being an old-time farmer, Gus, you probably really liked that rain last night.
Oh, it was wonderful. It's something we've been needing for a long time. That's a good start.
That's a good start. I figured up yesterday, and since October, we had 2 2/29 of rain since October.
Oh, my, that's about right.
That's mighty slim pickings.
That sure is.
Well, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we will talk about how your families got here into Spearman and how you all met, and anything else we happen to think about. How about that?
Fine.
We'll be back right after this message.
Mom, how much longer? I'll never get this.
Have I done something good for my family, baby? Have I done a good deed or loved a child in need? I've given them a reason to smile.
Did you know I used to hide under the bed so I wouldn't have to practice?
You? But you're a good piano player.
I didn't think so. Here, I'll teach you something. I'll play the bottom part and you play the top part.
Okay.
Have I done something good for my family, baby? The things I do for them bring such a feeling that it's all worthwhile.
Remember a little love, and you'll create memories they'll never forget.
The things have you for them brings such a feeling that it's all worthwhile.
A thought from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Welcome back to Hansford Information, and we're doing a Hansford Memories this morning, and we're going to be visiting with Clementine and N.F. Renner, better known to everyone as Gus. Let's establish how your families came to Hansford County and who they were and kind of where they settled. Just whichever one wants to go first.
My family, my dad's name was Joe, and my mother's name was Hattie, and Veneman. And my dad came down here into the Panhandle in 1905, he and his brother. They liked the place. They thought they'd love to live here. Both of them were single. So my dad went back to Missouri, where my mother was, and then they decided that they would go to Montana, and Dad would work there in the mines until he obtained enough money to build a little house here in the Panhandle for us. So they moved up there. They were married there at Butte, Montana. I was born there, and before I was a year old, they came down here. It was in 1907, and when Mama came, she said that she was the happiest person on earth. She saw this little two-room house out here on the prairie with nothing around it, but she thought, oh, it's ours. And she was just so happy. And I guess to her dying day, she always liked that little two-room house.
I wonder what it was like back then, what this Panhandle looked like, because it's been so, like we said, so dry here, and things have changed over the years. I've read where there was grass up to the bellies of the horses, and sometimes that's hard to imagine. Did she ever talk about what it looked like when she came?
Well, I know that I don't think the grass was ever that tall in our part. We settled in the northern part of the Panhandle, about 7 miles from the state line, and it wasn't that high there. But she too thought that it was rather God-forsaken, but she did love it. Just because it was theirs.
You said you all were from Missouri originally, and via Montana. Missouri's pretty green state with trees and that type of thing. I know I had a little bit of a culture shock when I came out here from Tennessee. I wondered where all the trees were, and I wasn't too sure I wanted to stay, but I've loved it ever since.
Well, there's just too many trees back there for me. You have to look up straight up to see anything. And then what do you see? Just the sky. And I had an aunt that came out to visit, and she didn't like it here. And so I said, well, just look how far you can see. Yeah, but what do you see when you look? She didn't see anything.
Over the years, I've come to see more and more through taking art lessons with Lamelia Sparks. She said to be aware of what's surrounding you. And I think each day, if we really open our eyes and look, we'll see a thing of beauty in this Panhandle. And
there
something
is.
else to learn.
There is, yes. There's plenty here if we just open our eyes, as you say, and look. That's true.
Now, your place was out, I believe, Gus, you told me it was out toward the Bernstein elevators?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It's east of the Bernstein elevators. Okay. And when John Stewart and I were married, we lived on Section 17. It was just just a short distance from the elevator, a mile or two, something like that. Then I kept on farming. It was the old Auckland land. They let us have that. After John died, well, I lived out there, and until 1950, when I moved to town, into Spearman. And I hated to go. I just really hated it with a passion. But everybody thought it would be best for me, and I'm sure they had myself at heart. But it was so hard to go.
Well, by 1950, things were changing in this world. And a lot of, you mentioned before we went on the air, the crime that we see today, it was even changing from the early times when you were here. But when you moved into Spearman, you said you didn't have your doors locked, or?
No, we didn't think about locking a door. And even when I lived alone out there, we had had a gun, a rifle, but it was up on the wall out on the porch. So it wouldn't have done very much good.
You'd had to get out of the porch to get to it.
Yeah, that's right, but no fear at all for anything like that. But it is surely different now, and when we go back out there to the place, I still got land out there, and I just have a longing to live back in the country. But I'm happy here in town. We have good neighbors, wonderful neighbors, and all in all, it's just fine to live here.
Well, Gus, let's get you in here. How did you get to the Texas Panhandle, and how did you and Clementine meet?
Well, the way I got here, I guess it was 1926. Well, first of all, we were all born in 20 miles west of Wichita, Kansas.
Okay, know that area.
And I had an uncle who lived out here. And my dad and Mom came out here to see them.
Now, what was your dad and Mom's name?
August and Mary Renner.
Okay.
And they came out here that time, and then a year or two later, in 1926 and 28, when Dad came here, we all came that time. Then in 31, the beginning of the Dust Bowl days, we moved out here.
You came at a rough time there, Gus. Did you?
Terrible.
Like dust.
I was going to say, he must have liked dust. Those days were rough.
Oh, they were bad.
Now, you settled in Sherman County.
Sherman County, 2 miles east and 1 south of Texoma, just across the line in Texas.
Was it just about the same across the whole Panhandle, or was it areas that were worse than others in the Dust Bowl days?
Well, I guess it's pretty well the same. Of course, in the grasslands, it didn't blow so much, but all the farmland blowed so much you couldn't keep it, you couldn't stop it hardly.
Now, when that Sunday that happened, Black Sunday, I believe.
Black Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
You were living in Sherman County.
We were living in Sherman County.
What do you remember about those days, that day?
I remember it was a bad one. Couldn't see anything, could hardly see your hand in front of your face. Went out to the windmill and the sparks flew. I got a hold of to shut it off. It was steel. About an inch fire snapped across it. That much electricity it had in that windmill. It was terrible. Couldn't hardly. Well, when time we got home, we were at the brother-in-law's place, and we had to stay there until it got cleared up before we could go home. Dust everywhere.
I still cannot imagine. I mean, even yesterday the wind was blowing so bad when we were coming in that it kicked up the dust pretty bad, and Kelly and I were talking about. Kelly, can you imagine it being just pitch black outside? And was that what it was out?
It was.
It was just as dark as it could be.
And a lamp, we had, of course, kerosene lamps, but you could look over there and look like kind of a match or something. No light to speak of at all. In the house. And I don't know that we had the worst house, but we had a bad one to keep outdoors.
I know on John R. Collard's flashback interview, he said, we thought we had a pretty good house until that hit. And he said something about putting his pants out at night, and then the next morning the storm had come through. He couldn't really find his pants except for the lumps that he finally found there, and was able to kind of get dressed. Okay, you were in Sherman County, and then how'd you get to Hansford County, and how'd you meet this fine lady?
Well, I guess that we used to go to church in Guyman, and I got acquainted with her, and then I got acquainted with her first husband too. I don't remember when we got acquainted really.
Oh no, back in the
sometime
30s. Yeah.
In the 30s was where we started the church.
Uh-huh.
And then my father died when he was a rather young man, 40-some years old. And we had 2 minors. There was 8 of us children. And 2 minors, and so I stayed home with my mother. I didn't marry until I was 40 years old when I married. when we married.
And you said that was in
No.
1952? Is that what you told me?
That's when we married in 1952. Mm-hmm. Dad died in 48, I think. No, yeah, something like that.
Now, were you the eldest son, or?
I was the oldest boy. I had 2 sisters older than I was. So I stayed home. And during the war, my youngest sister and I had done the farming. And the 3 boys all went to the army. And then when the 2 youngest ones came home, they wanted to farm.
You might mention some of those brothers and sisters, and Clementine, you need to mention yours too, so we can establish some family ties here.
Clarence is my baby brother, Clarence Renner.
I know
here in
him well
Spearman.
too.
Philip's nephew, Clarence's boy.
Uh-huh.
And I have one brother that lives at Texoma, Ralph, and a sister that lives there. My sister lives 10 miles from Texoma, south, and Ralph lives on the home place. And I have one sister that lives in Amarillo, the youngest girl. She's 10 years younger than I am. And I have 2 sisters and a brother that's dead.
Okay. And your brother was Johnny Veneman.
There were just the 2 of us,
Okay.
Johnny and I. And he was born in Missouri. And of course, as I said, I was born in Butte, Montana. And we couldn't go to school here for the reason that we lived, I imagine about 7 miles or so from a school. That was the McBride School, west across the Guyman Highway. And so we'd have to go horseback. I did go 6 months to the school, but I was fortunate in that about 1.5 miles or 2 miles from where we lived, the school teacher lived. And she had to go to that school every morning, so I would walk down there and get in a buggy with her and go to the schoolhouse. And then she'd bring me back, and I'd walk on home. But it was too much for 2 kids to go that far in the wintertime. So Dad and Mama made arrangements with an aunt of his sister, an aunt of mine, and we stayed with her during the school year, and then we came home in the summer and went back again. And then the crying would start.
Oh,
when we left. And we'd cry all the way to Kansas City, and then we'd let up, and we got along all right.
Oh, you went all the way to Kansas City to school?
Went to Chillicothe, Missouri. That's where we went to school. But I wouldn't give anything for my education. I don't have a lot, but I really think that I got a lot out of it. And Johnny did too. He didn't get to go as long as I did for the reason that when I got out of high school, I wouldn't go back, and he wouldn't go without me. So I guess I was selfish in that he didn't get more of an education.
You just couldn't take that another crime.
No,
trip.
we'd had all that we needed. But he got along good, even if he didn't have a great education.
We might mention that Johnny Veneman was a county commissioner here in Hansford County for a number of years.
Well, he wasn't, not for a number of years. He didn't run for it, or he didn't apply for it or anything. Ed Vernon, he was the commissioner, and he became ill with cancer. So he came over one day to Johnny's and asked him if he would take the rest of his term. And so Johnny said, I don't like that kind of life, but he said, how could you turn down a dying man? And he thought the world of Ed, so he said he'd take it. He just filled out that term, and then Joe T. took it.
Okay, see, I didn't realize that. Let's take a real quick break, and we'll come back, and why don't you all be thinking of some good stories to tell us, okay? We'll be back after this message.
Picture a playground filled with 4-year-old children. Picture each face so full of promise. Well, which child deserves to be read to? This one? Or is it that one over there? Which child will get a hot lunch? Who will have a chance to sing? The choice is yours. Volunteer for Head Start. With your help, more low-income preschool children can get what other children already have. Call 1-800-27-START for more information and a brochure on volunteer opportunities with Head Start in your community. Change the world of a child, and you change the world.
Brought to you by Head Start, Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Hansford Information, and we're doing a Hansford Memories with Gus and Clementine Renner. And before we went to break, I asked them to think of some stories to tell us about the history of Hansford County, just some something that they remember from their childhood or early years. And Clementine, what were you telling about a freighter?
Well, a freighter was coming from Texhoma on it was a beautiful Sunday afternoon in February, just one of those gorgeous days that we have here. And he got out to shut the gate behind him, and the horses took off. And they followed the road all the way down to our house. It was a long ways. And our gate was open, so they went into the yard. And they just circled all the way around with the wagon behind them. So, just as it happened, my dad had purchased a brand new implement. I think it was a planter. And it was sitting out there by itself. And when they got to that, they just kind of straddled it and hit that, and the reach broke on the wagon. Then they had the two wheels. And here they went, just going like crazy. They went straight for the house, and my mother was scared to death, and she slammed the door shut. And we had two barrels that we had water in right close to the house. And they went between the house and those two barrels. And this very day, that same little hole is in the side of that house. It's been covered, of course, with stucco, but the hole is still there.
You know where it's at.
Yes. And then when they got through running in between there, they still made some more circles. So Mama said, well, she didn't know what to do. She had the two little kids, and she thought, well, we go to the cellar for everything. I'll take them to the cellar. She took them to the cellar, and Dad said, well, that's the worst place you could have taken them. Might have caved in. She didn't think of that. Anyway, we went to the cellar, and they finally got tangled up in the garden fence. One fell down, and then, of course, it was all over. But that was a day of days, I'll tell you.
One calamity after another.
Yeah, it was terrible. But we weathered that, too. And, of course, the man there was one of them that he was just tied to the wagon, one horse. So he broke loose. He wasn't going to run that fast. And the freighter caught this horse and got on him and rode down there. But poor fellow, he didn't have any money. And, of course, Dad didn't either after he bought this machinery. But anyway, he never did get it paid for, so we were just out that much more. He was a man that lived over in Ochiltree County, and that road that these freighters took went right by our place. And many a night, especially in the winter, they would camp up about a half a mile from our house, and then they'd come to the house, and we only had a 2-room house, but they would put their bunks down on the floor, and it was a lot better than sleeping out in that cold. Any time Mom and Dad did that.
I think probably houses back then were just open and very hospitable to everybody and welcomed any visitors, really.
Yes, we saw no one for days, for weeks, just the family. And I don't know, I've grown up that way, and it doesn't bother me a bit to be alone. Or it didn't, I don't know what it would be now. Might be different, yeah.
Is there something in particular that may have fallen by the wayside over the years that you'd like to see reestablished or brought back that you think could benefit today's people?
Well, I think our hospitality would be one of them if it was brought back. And people would respect each other more than they do. And especially the younger ones would have respect for their parents even. We'll start with them, let alone the rest of the congregation or whatever it might be around. But I guess we'll all live through that too. 1990s, they say now.
Right, and the year 2000's looming right on the horizon. Gus, what about you? Is there something that you would like to see brought back? Or do you have a story you'd like to tell us? Because we've got just a few more minutes.
I really don't have too much of a story. I grew up in one of 8 children, and we had quite a time. And when my father died, well, 2 of the younger ones were going to grade school yet.
Mm-hmm.
And they went on. And my sister and I done the farming. She was a good tractor hand. And then my nephew came out and worked for us, and there was 4 of those boys, 2 or 3 of his friends, and they used to ride horse all the time. And they'd really give you a thrill, because they just didn't have any fear at all. And then we got a Model T and for them, and then they was driving that thing, and it got to where it wouldn't run, but that one heavy set boy, and if he got on one side of it, it would run. So he had to so they spent a lot of time with that thing. They really had a lot of fun.
I'd like to tell one more story. My mother, she could do most everything. She made a hand with Dad all the time, worked in the field and everywhere. But this story that I'm going to tell, she was saving time again. Well, she had to ride horseback, about 4 or 5 miles to the mailbox. And so she decided that she would see if she could churn while she was going. So she put the cream in this bucket with the handle on it, tied it on to the saddle horn, rode up there, and when she came back, she had butter, with the movement.
Uh-huh.
So she wasted no time, period.
There goes that story about the necessity is the mother of invention, so she invented a different way to do that.
That's right.
Well, I tell you what, we're just about out of time, and we didn't even get to talk about the Historical Society and bring us up to date on that. Could I ask y'all to come back and schedule another date with us, and we'll talk about the museum and what you've done on the museum? And
I'd like to. I'm obsessed with that.
I've never known as many hours as I see you down there. I really would never know that. But we'll do that, and I want to thank you both for coming. And we've been visiting with Clementine and NF Gus Renner, and we're going to have them back again. And we've done another Hansford memory, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Be visiting with us again on Tuesday when we'll have another one scheduled. And everyone have a good day, and keep the prayers up for a little more rain. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Carol.
Thank you.